Skirrid Inn harbours centuries of secrets, scandals and tragedies, so it's no wonder that once last orders are called, the paranormal patrons of the ancient inn make their presence known. Come and sit by me as we get into the grisly history and the ghostly encounters of one of Wales's most haunted pubs. Hi friend, how has your day been today? Are you doing good? Are you staying hydrated? I want you to be drinking that water, you know what I'm like. If you're new around here, welcome. Hi, I'm Claire and I'm a lover of all things morbid, mysterious and macabre. I've spent hours and hours absolutely enthralled in ghost hunting shows and paranormal investigations, but you know what I love more than all of the night vision footage and the EVPs? I love the history behind a paranormal encounter, the origins of urban legends, and the real, raw, personal ghost stories that people have experienced firsthand. So that is what we are going to do. Every week we sit down and swap ghost stories like a good old sleepover. So if that's your scene, I'd highly recommend subscribing so that you never miss a chat. So this week's source is delivered to us by one Richard Estep, who wrote the book The Spirits Behind Bars, and this was a really good book. It was a brilliant account of Richard's investigation that he did at the place, along with a few other bits on the history and a few of the stories as well that were sort of like related to the building. I'll put the link in the description to get your own copy because it's definitely worth the read. It also covers Shepton Mallet Prison as well, which is an episode I am planning on doing a little bit later in the month, so I'll be getting my use out of this book. So today's story takes us over to Wales and specifically the Brecon Beacons National Park. So in the shadow of a holy mountain, you can find the inn that is thought to be one of the oldest in Wales. And while the records have been lost to time, some believe that an inn has stood on the site since the 11th century. That's right, you already know, we are talking about the Skirrid Inn. Now, this place is infamous for being used as a courtroom until 1640. The legend goes that hundreds of people lost their lives to the hangman's noose inside, like actually inside the building. And so it comes as zero surprise to anyone that it is now also home to more than a few otherworldly entities. It was formerly known as the Skirrid Mountain Inn, and that's because it got its name from the mountain that like kind of shadows over the whole area. And fun fact about the mountain itself, its unique shape comes from like a landslip in the Ice Age, but the legend is much more interesting, obviously. And the legend goes that in the hours after the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, the mountain was struck by lightning and sort of like broke in two. So that's your supernatural geography fact for today. But back to the Skirrid Inn anyway. There have been records of criminals being tried and put to death in the area dating back to like 1110. And the first person to be hanged there in 1110 was a man named John Crowther for sheep stealing. So knowing that there definitely was a courtroom here until the 1600s, like it's not a huge leap to suggest that there has been some building on that site serving as a courtroom since the 1100s. The courtroom itself was like upstairs and was thought to be like complete with a judge's retiring room as well. So like it was a whole sort of like setup. Between 1100 and 1485, manorial courts would have been held here. Manorial. The lord of the manor would have done the courts. And these court proceedings would have been like civil matters that the lord of the manor would have had jurisdiction over. So that was like primarily things like local contracts, like land tenure issues and like just civil cases. But there were other sorts of court proceedings, as it was also a place where many people were tried, found guilty and put to death. One of the most infamous judges of his time was a man called Lord Chief Justice George Jeffreys, and he is thought to have presided over some cases at the Skirrid Inn. Now, I say thought to have presided over cases because we don't actually know whether he did or not. It's just thought to have happened. Now, a bit on the man himself, he was known as the hanging judge because he was ruthless. He was absolutely ruthless. Like, he put so many people to death throughout his career. He actually played a really significant role in the Bloody Assizes later on, which was like this travelling court that saw Welsh rebels tried for their part in the Battle of Sedgemoor in 1685. So the unfortunate prisoners that were tried at the Skirrid and destined for the noose would spend their final hours in the prison cell on the mezzanine floor, like between the stairs. So like in between, so like you go up one flight of stairs and then there on like this little floor, there is just this prison cell, like there's nothing else. And then you carry on going up the stairs. And it's like this tiny little hovel sort of. I mean, it's just a holding cell for what they thought was scum on the earth. So it's not going to be a very nice place to be, you know? So it was dark and just not great. People that would have been held there would have been listening out for the footsteps of the jailer coming to collect them, like signaling that it was time to meet their maker in the nicest way possible. They would have been led to the stairwell where their sentence would be carried out. They would be hung by the neck until they were dead. And this would have been a particularly gruesome death. When you think of hangings, you might think of like the trap door that opens under the prisoner, so like they drop and break their neck and die instantly and it's over. That type of hanging is known as the long drop, and it was not used at the Skirrid Inn. They didn't even have a hatch or like a proper gallows, so the condemned would have been hanged with what was called the short drop. Apparently, all the executions took place in the Skirrid stairwell. You would have been forced off the steps to just hang in the stairwell. Like, you would have suffocated, and it would have been such a slow and horrifically painful death. You would probably have been writhing in agony for up to 15 minutes before death finally, mercifully took you. And while no exact records have survived, it is thought that around 180 people died in that stairwell between the 12th and the 17th centuries. The very real reminder exists in the pub today, like where the beam that apparently actually held up the noose can be seen. And you can even see like these scorches and drag marks that were allegedly made by the rope that ended so many lives. And I'm saying allegedly a lot because I just want to point out that in Richard's book, he is kind of skeptical about the hangings actually taking place in the stairwell. So it may have been that actually there was a scaffold for the gallows outside the courtroom, but we just don't know. And the most widely accepted story that's been passed down for years and years is that they were hung in the stairwell, but we just have no way to verify either way. But even so, if we follow the story, it really would have been like this one-stop justice shop back then. Like, you could have been tried, charged, and executed all in the same building, which would have been good for like the guards and everyone, because then there's less chance of you escaping while you're being transported. So it's just good for them, that's all. But could you even like imagine what it would have been like for those people first arriving at the Skirrid Inn, like wondering if this was going to be the last time that they would breathe fresh air? And I mean, that kind of energy, like that fear, that palpable unknowing uncertainty, like that is just a recipe for paranormal activity. Obviously that and like all the deaths, I guess. But it's not just the building itself that has this ominous energy. Oh no. Legend has it that there is a burial ground near the back of the pub at the bottom of a like sloping garden. So if 180 people really were executed here, they would need somewhere to be buried, because if you're executed as a criminal, you're not allowed to be buried in a churchyard because you don't deserve it anymore, apparently. Like, many psychic mediums and investigators have like reported this ominous negative energy coming from that area. But it does make sense though, right? Like, if you really think about it, it makes sense. Like the anger and the resentment that just because you were found guilty of a crime that, let's face it, you may or may not have committed. Because like, let's be honest, they probably did not have Detective Luther back then. Like, if they see a crime, they're probably just going to arrest the first person that looks a little bit suspicious, you know? Like, there's not the processes that there are right now. And I know that right now isn't perfect either, but I think back then was a little worse, I'd like to think. All right, that's getting into a whole conversation. So then you're collared off the street, you're tried, found guilty, and then you're executed, and then you couldn't be buried with your family on hallowed ground. Like, that is just asking for restless, angry souls at that point. With such a long and violent past, it really is no surprise that the Skirrid Inn is such a hotspot for paranormal activity. But it's funny that the most famous, I mean, it's not funny, I mean, like, all of these people died, Claire, come on. The most famous spirit that resides within the building actually had nothing to do with the courthouse. In the 1800s, a landlord named Henry Price lived at the inn along with his Fanny. No, with his wife, who was called Fanny. Unfortunately, Fanny would pass away in 1875 at the age of 35 from consumption. And for those that don't know, consumption is more commonly referred to nowadays as pulmonary tuberculosis. This was a horrible, nasty, infectious disease that was really common at the time, and it affected your lungs, and you would develop this like horrible, nasty, like bloody cough. You'd be coughing up blood and all sorts. It was not nice. Not a nice thing to get. The disease would continue to progress, and it would slowly waste your body and just destroy your lungs until finally your body would give up and shut down. But that's why it was called consumption, because it was like your body would waste away. This disease was consuming your body. And while Fanny was buried at the nearby St. Michael's churchyard, her spirit is said to very much remain at the Skirrid Inn. If there are any like changes in the building, like moving furniture around, or if they get like new employees, Fanny will usually come and check to see if everything's okay. While she was like a really stern, like no-nonsense woman in life, she is described as quite a friendly spirit that is most active in room 3, which is rumoured to be the room that she passed away in. You'll know that you're about to be visited by Fanny by the smell of lavender and like the rustle of like one of those old-fashioned 1800s dresses. The other rooms of the inn also have their own ghost stories attached to them, which I'm sure you're not in the least bit surprised to hear. Room 2 was what was formerly known as the judge's chambers, so like that would be where the judge would go to retire to after like hearing cases in the courtroom. Now, guests staying in room 2 commonly report that there's like this really ominous presence in there that makes them feel like really sick and dizzy. But out of all the rooms though, room 1 is the one that terrifies me the most. Because the story goes that there was this woman that was staying in room 1. She came running down the stairs, dripping wet, with just only a coat on, shouting, "She tried to kill me." Like, she just came running down into this busy bar area. There's loads of other people, like, drinking. She's there in a coat, probably shivering, just absolutely terrified, screaming that someone's tried to kill her. Obviously, that was a lot to handle, but when the landlord managed to, like, finally calm her down, the woman said that she'd been taking a bath when all of a sudden she felt this, like, pressure on her, like, holding her down underneath the water. She somehow managed to, like, wriggle herself free of whatever this force was, grabbed her coat and just obviously got the hell out of the room. She reported that she didn't see anything out of the ordinary. There was no weird sounds or any, like, smells or anything, which obviously would have indicated that it was Fanny's presence. And I'd like to think that it wouldn't have been Fanny because, I mean, like, she was a landlady and she was still checking up on the pub to make sure that it was, like, up to standard for guests. Like, I don't think she would try to drown one. I don't know. Even so, it was weird that the woman said she tried to kill me and not like he or it or something tried to kill me. A former landlady was also interviewed by the BBC in 2002, where she claimed that her dad once woke up to a shadow figure standing at the end of his bed and has since refused to stay at the Skirrid Inn on his own. I mean, totally understandable. I completely get that. I think that's my biggest fear with the paranormal. Like that one thing there, like, no thank you. To wake up in the middle of the night and see this fucking great big shadow figure lurking over the bed watching me, like, nope, no thank you, no, we're done here. But whichever room you choose for a sleepover at the Skirrid Inn, you're probably not going to get the best night's sleep in between the footsteps, the slamming doors, moving objects, and creepiest of all, hushed conversations of disembodied voices in the dead of night in your room. Apparently, the ghost of the hanging Judge Jeffreys has also been known to appear to people upstairs, which is interesting that he would come back to the Skirrid Inn as he actually died in the Tower of London. And like I said earlier, he is thought to have presided over cases at the Skirrid. There is actually no proof whether he did or not. Either way, I can imagine that if it is his spirit, that it wouldn't be the nicest of encounters, being the charming, benevolent, merciful man that he was in life and all that. The wooden staircase also has an ominous feel to it. There's a theme running through the Skirrid Inn, isn't there? Definitely a theme of ominous energy. I don't know. The landlady that was interviewed by the BBC also said that she often spotted a shadow figure walking up the stairs and along the corridor. And apparently this shadow figure really didn't have a nice feeling to him, and she's not the only one that has experienced this. So many people have reported feeling a dark presence on the stairs, with lots of photos of apparitions manifesting on the staircase. So it seems like that's the sort of hotspot for that sort of paranormal activity. But even with all of these reports of shadowy figures, we don't know for sure who this entity is. Like maybe it's the judge himself, his hangman, or even like a convict that's like angry about being killed in what was really a very brutal way. We just don't know. And let's not forget that the mezzanine floor just off the staircase is where the prison cell is, which is where the convicts would be held before their trials or their executions. Guess what? This also has an ominous energy to it. It's described as having this really heavy, dark, negative energy, and many people who enter the cell report feeling like overwhelmingly morose is the best kind of way to describe it. It's not a nice place to be, and it definitely has the power to change your mood. Like you can walk in there and just be totally fine, then you're in there and you walk back out and you're like, I hate life. Maybe not like that. I don't know. And I mean, this also makes sense. Like this is where prisoners would have spent their last night on earth. Like the pain, the remorse, the fear, the panic would have been so palpable in that area that it's no surprise that like some of that energy is still within the walls of the cell. And while you're sitting in the cell, you might also hear the unmistakable sounds of disembodied footsteps coming up the stairwell. The footsteps are described as really slow and rhythmical, almost like a jailer accompanying a prisoner on their last walk before being put to death. In the Spirits Behind Bars book, Richard Estep states that the ghost of the first man to be hanged in the Skirrid could also still be haunting the place too. You remember John Crowther, who was hanged in 1110 for stealing that sheep? Well, his brother James was also a criminal and was found guilty of highway robbery. Like actually violent robberies, like muggings basically. But instead of being executed like John was, James was given 9 months imprisonment. If anything is going to cause someone to come back as a ghost, I would say that it would make you pretty angry that your brother only got away with 9 months in prison while you got hung in the stairwell. Downstairs, the pub and dining area commonly see paranormal activity too. Items are moved around, glasses will just fly off the bar and smash, and on occasion, visitors are even attacked. Some people have reported feeling like a really strong choking sensation, with one woman suffering so badly that she fainted and had to be carried outside for fresh air. When she came to and obviously went home, she noticed this really angry red mark around her neck, which would have been exactly where a noose would have sat. Now, in the book The Haunted Pub Guide by Guy Lyon Playfair, he also mentioned that there was an apparition of a Roundhead soldier from the days of Oliver Cromwell that had also been spotted within the pub. There are also traditions that have been passed down through the custodians of the Skirrid Inn that have supernatural origins. Each night, the landlord will pour a pint of ale into the devil's cup, which he will then leave on the doorstep. This offering is intended to keep the devil at bay and appease the spirits that reside within the building. And each morning, without fail, some of that ale would be gone. So either the devil is happily being kept at bay, or some of the wildlife knows where to go for a little treat at night. Nowadays, the cup is left inside overnight, but the devil still hasn't knocked on their door, so maybe that's good enough. It really is unfortunate that there is such a lack of written records or concrete evidence of the pub's history, but I think that the sheer number of word-of-mouth stories and experiences from visitors and paranormal investigators, I would say it seems to point towards the conclusion that, yeah, the Skirrid Inn is a very, very haunted place. But what do you think? Have you ever stopped off at the Skirrid Inn and experienced more than just a great beverage and a comfy bed? Please let me know your thoughts down below, because I absolutely love reading other people's ghost experiences. Throughout the research for this one, there was a lot of allegedly and some believe and legend has it. Could it be that it's just a creepy place with a lot of alcohol-fueled stories? Yeah, that's entirely possible, of course, but on the other hand, there are an awful lot of stories attached to the site with people apparently still experiencing paranormal activity to this day. I definitely believe that the Skirrid Inn is haunted, and even for all the negative stories that I came across, like all of the negative entities on the stairs or the woman almost being drowned, I didn't see anyone mention that they would never go there again or never step foot in there again. It still very much seems like it has a very warm and welcoming feel to it. But let me know what you think. If you enjoyed this video, I would be forever grateful if you would hit the like button, and I'd love to see you back here for another story sometime. So maybe, I don't know, If you fancy it, you might want to subscribe. I don't know. It's up to you. But that is all from me today. I cannot wait to chat with you more tomorrow. So until next time, sleep safe. But we don't mind. The desk is fine. It doesn't matter, frankly. About 3 people will see this anyway, so it does not matter.